We have a couple of questions for you. I'd like to just start by saying that there have been a few questions asking for specific information about some of the rarer types that haven't been mentioned so far. And I'd like to encourage people who are looking for that information to go to the Ehlers-Danlos Society webpage, and there is a page of information about each specific type available there. And if you have specific questions about one of those other rarer types, our helpline, the Ehlers-Danlos Society helpline, is available to you. So please do take advantage of those resources. Okay. So Leanne, there's a question from a woman here who has adrenal issues in addition to the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And she feels like her anxiety around this additional medical problem is exacerbating all of her symptoms. The Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the anxiety is just causes the Addison's symptoms to flare, as well as some of the musculoskeletal issues around the EDS. And she's asking for tips in dealing with the worry and its consequences. Both of you may have some suggestions about that.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to tell someone to not worry about something if it's, you know, especially if it's exacerbating symptoms and making you feel worse. I think something that came across in all of the data was that people just found that managing those thoughts and kind of working out where that worry is stemming from and what they can do about it was something that they found really helpful. But I'm sure, Kayla, you probably have some more practical.
Oh, yeah, for sure. One thing I, offer people who have to worry a lot, get it out. A lot of the worry is internal. What is a cathartic, helpful, therapeutic way you can get it out? Whether that's a somatic therapeutic practice, whether it's a mindful-based practice, figuring out what works for you and what supports you in your journey is going to be essential in, at minimum, getting it out.
Are there resources you could recommend to people if they're looking for help in terms of these issues?
Yeah, certainly. So for finding like a provider in your area with a specific modality, I definitely want to recommend Psychology Today. And for any and all individuals that have any type of insurance, whether it's commercial or state, federal funded, on the back of your card, there is care management or case management. You can call them and they'll do a search and give you providers with availability so that you can connect with people in your area specifically.
Great tip.
Yeah, so they'll do the legwork for you.
Okay, fantastic. So, any suggestions for how people deal with the past trauma of not being believed by doctors and family?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I guess, again, I think it all comes off of lived experience, doesn't it? So if people have that experience and that's something that they are then going to carry with them, the only way kind of moving forward, and it kind of ties in with what you were saying, is again, calling out how they're feeling, thinking about, within the family unit, what do those conversations look like? Is it helpful to have those conversations with relatives, or is it helpful to kind of think about who it is you're going to be communicating with and sharing those experiences with? A lot of participants in the study commented on almost recognizing that there were certain people and certain spaces to have certain conversations, and other people and other places where if those conversations were not going to be served or not going to be heard, they just wouldn't bring them to them. And as much as that was difficult for them to kind of accept that there were certain people in their lives that maybe weren't going to support them in the way that they wanted to, over time they realized that it was more helpful to go somewhere where they felt heard and they felt seen than to speak to people who weren't going to receive what they were saying.
Agree. Okay. And also explore why it's so important for you to have kind of that gold star, that check mark around being believed. If you feel like you have providers that don't believe you, change your care. If you feel like you have, maybe family members or support systems that are not engaging or believing you, you can always build, curate, or create a family, especially generating and starting in spaces like this.
Yes, thank you. So then kind of on the flip side, there's a question about how best to cope with the mental trauma of being a carer when you're dealing with all these issues yourself. You know, a lot of family members live with EDS themselves, and they're also caring for other people with EDS. So how do you cope with the mental trauma of being a carer for a family member when you have EDS, autism, and ADHD alongside other things yourself?
I would say looking at what it is you need, creating boundaries, and figuring out how you can best support. So boundaries don't control your behavior. Boundaries control my behavior. Rules control other people's behavior. So looking at what you have established in the dynamic of your relationship that are rules versus boundaries. I know that I can care for you today because I have this much to give. Sometimes we experience trauma or we go into trauma land when we overexert or overextend ourselves beyond what we're capable of. It's okay if you can't do all 10 of the things. If you have enough to do 5 or 4, I would rather you do 5 or 4 whole and preserve the rest of yourself so that you don't overexert and, you know, cause trauma or friction or further kind of have friction in the relationship.
And I also think it's important to, you know, recognize that those experiences are going to be different. You know, there's a lot of participants commented, as I said, you know, about this worry for future generations. And naturally, you're going to base that off of what you've experienced yourself. But I think with anything, even in my work as a genetic counsellor, the key thing that we always discuss is that everyone's lived experience is going to be different. You know, what you've gone through to get your diagnosis and your journey that you've been on is going to be very different to that of your child or the parents that have come before you. And I think you're going to naturally take that into raising your children. But on the flip side, the thing that you have now that you didn't have before with your children is the ability to empower them to take ownership over their health, to take ownership over and accountability for, you know, their actions and what that looks like for them moving forwards. And I think people find that that can sometimes remove the pressure. As a parent, naturally, you want the best for your children. That is, regardless of a condition or whatever, that's always going to remain the same. But you add something else in that requires an additional level of care and support. And I think I always encourage, you know, the parents that I see to really help their children understand the condition themselves so that they can formulate their own lived experience, and it helps with the parents in removing that pressure from them.
Yeah. I think emphasizing the the importance of self-care and that idea that you put your own oxygen mask on before you help others.
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure that you're operating with a full tank before you try to give to other people. Yeah. So there's an interesting question here about immigrants. This questioner is an international student over 11,000 miles away from home, and the feelings of loss and isolation are a huge struggle. And they're wondering, when language is another barrier, what kind of online support or books can help?
Do you want to go first?
Is it help with just general trauma or specifically EDS?
I think with the isolation and just separation from all that's familiar.
Of course, I'm drawing a blank. Give me a sec.
I guess, whilst you,
go ahead.
I think, you know, it is really difficult. And I think even with people who are not miles away from support, it's finding spaces, again, that, like we've both been saying, that are going to serve you and are going to hear what you're saying. So support groups, I think, are just imperative. They really do make the difference from you just feeling heard. We really advocate for all of our patients, whether it's with vascular EDS or within my other work, to really connect with others, because whilst a clinician is only going to be able to give you so much, there are people who either understand what it feels like to go through what you're going through or have the condition themselves and can share things with you. And even if it's none of that, even if at the bare minimum it's a space for you to feel like you have people around you, that can usually be, you know, the make or break between feeling really isolated and alone. Obviously, we're not saying that that's going to completely solve everything, but I do think in that isolation and in that space, you really have to, and it's hard, but you really have to push yourself to try and connect in any way that you can. And this, the EDS Society is a classic example of that person being all those miles away, but still being able to connect in today. And so if they can connect in today, they can connect in with the other stuff that the society are doing in helping them feel like they are a part of a community.
Right. The online communities, and there are foreign language online communities as well.
Yes, and also specifically a book, and it's not mental health heavy or textbooky, but it's Iron Flame. It's about a girl who has EDS, and it has a really big following. If they are looking to connect and still be light, I'm more than certain they can find a book community wherever they are. And all that to say, focusing on whatever your special interest is, 9 times out of 10, especially in, the land of the internet, we can always bridge that gap, and it doesn't always have to be like condition specific. It can be interest specific or topic specific, so that we can continue to generate the sole basis of what, both of our presentations stated, like finding that support and community where you are.
Okay. Well, let's see. One more. Any suggestions for managing risk and anxiety around activity, doing activities? I guess this would be, they're not specifying what the specific risk, but for people, I guess, with vascular or musculoskeletal risks.
Advice and tips is difficult. I guess going off of what I found with the research was that, I think I mentioned this very briefly, but a lot of participants spoke about a risk assessment. So, thinking about what your non-negotiables are when you go out and are going to engage in a social activity. Is it, one person said, I just won't go anywhere where there's high chairs because I don't want my feet to dangle and I know that I'm going to feel uncomfortable. So if someone invites me out for a drink, I'm going to make sure that there's a chair that I can sit on. And she said, it feels silly, but for her, that removes that anxiety of turning up to a space where she doesn't know what to expect. And I think it really ties in with this uncertainty of the unknown. That is what a lot of anxiety is caused by. And so my advice would be, risk assess. You're going to feel differently to someone else with vascular EDS. You're going to feel differently to someone else with the condition, but you're going to know what spaces you're going to feel safe in, what activities you're going to feel like you can engage in, and what activities you're going to think, you know what, if I really had to ask myself, do I feel like I'll be safe in this space? And the answer is no, then that's also okay. There is freedom in saying, no, this isn't going to work for me, and I recognize that. So that would be my advice.
Agree.
Okay. I have several colleagues who've been trying to teach me over the years that no is a complete sentence.
It is a very complete sentence.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. We're going to cut the question and answers just a little bit short so we have enough time for lunch, and we'll get back on our schedule at, I guess it'll be 1:30.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.